Hey, thank you for joining the Ed Sullivan Experience. We appreciate everybody joining us tonight. I have a very special guest tonight, Miss Joanne Richards, and she is the author of Midlife Magic. Okay, and this is the journey of Joanne Richards, so I advise you to get it, and what I'll do is I'll put the link at the end of the show for you to go to Amazon or wherever you can buy this, and please buy the book because it's a short read, so it's not that long. So if you're like me and you can't get through a lot of long books, this is perfect for you. So, and it's really fascinating, and we're going to learn some stuff tonight. So, hey, Joanne, thank you very much for joining us today. We appreciate you coming on the show. So,
thanks for having me. It's delightful.
Thank you. So can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, let's see. I am well past midlife. I'm in my late 60s, or mid to late 60s.
What?
I grew up in California. I have a grown daughter and 3 teenage grandchildren. I'm married to my current husband. I think it's 20 years now. It's 19 or 20. I've lost track. I think it's 19, actually.
Okay.
We just had an anniversary in July. And I've been married many times before that. And let's see, I was a Mormon for about 30 years, left the church, not to any major trauma or anything, but I left the church when I met my current husband. Happy I did. And I have found my love of, I reconnected with paranormal, and I, learned more about fairies and love that, and UFOs and aliens and magic and all those cool, wonderful woo-woo things. So that's how, by day and night, I'm a bookkeeper, but this other stuff,
Okay.
This other stuff is my real passion.
Okay. So, yeah, because you still got to pay the bills, right? So,
I do.
And unfortunately, paranormal, UFOs, and aliens don't pay the bills too much unless you can sell your books good. So hopefully we'll have some help with you with that.
Well, if COVID wasn't here, I'd probably be speaking at more conferences at the moment.
So, and that's why I wanted to ask you. So you do speak at conferences, and at those conferences, what is it that you're speaking about?
I've been speaking since 2007, and it's always been about UFOs, different alien species, the military involvement with all that, because that's what my husband and his dad did. They were military intelligence forever. So I've been speaking about different military operations that people don't know about, space battles, on-Earth battles, confrontations with aliens, some, just the general information about deals that are made with aliens. And I love speaking about the different species and what they're like, and, what their social structure is like, and do they get along with us or not, or, which ones are our allies and which ones are not. And then the more I got into it, and especially, well, I already knew this before I wrote my book, but the more I got into it, it's like, well, these species have their own witches or sorceresses. They also have fairies or elementals. So I've learned in the big picture of things that all these things are connected, and, we're not alone, and we do have some very interesting allies. And a lot of them have these same woo-woo things as we do. And it's just a wonderful connection. And so I love talking about it. Now that I have my book, I can broaden my scope and speak at more, paranormal conferences and other things. Because I used to speak just about my husband's experiences and his missions and things like that. And I can bring into my speaking and teaching about my own experiences. I've had my own UFO sightings. I have been around the fairies and have experienced their energy, and it's fabulous. And I can be in a room or in an area where there's definitely a spirit there, and I can feel that. So it's not all, I used to feel like I was just my husband's spokesperson,
right.
But I have my own experiences now, and so I bring that to the table.
That's awesome. So,
Yeah.
So I purchased your book, and I was reading your book. And,
Thank you.
You're very welcome. It's actually a great read because you start reading the book and you don't realize a lot of things about you. If I didn't know you or met you on the street or saw you at a UFO conference, I wouldn't have known some of this stuff. You've married, like you said, you've been married a few times.
Yes.
You were Mormon, which fascinates me that you were Mormon and gave that up.
I did.
So do you mind sharing why you gave that up?
I don't mind at all. And what's interesting, it's kind of a funny point because my older sister read the book. She goes, I learned things about you I didn't know. I go, yeah, I didn't really want to tell you guys everything. I mean, they knew how many times I'd been married, but there's certain things, and you might have already guessed which ones they didn't know the full story about.
Right.
But it's interesting because when I met Mark, my current husband, I was still an active Mormon, and that entails being at church for 3 hours every Sunday, or it used to. I think they've shortened their services now. I don't know. I've lost track. Right. And then you do a lot of service during the week, and you have little jobs that you do and all that. It can be very time consuming. When I met Mark, and he's in prison for something he didn't do. And I started visiting him, and I realized, number one, well, I'd rather be visiting this interesting person than sitting in church. I never had any traumatic, bad experience with church leaders. I keep telling people, it's like, I just had 5 bad Mormon husbands.
Right.
Or 5 Mormon husbands that were terrible husbands. And then I met Mark. And we started talking not about specific religions, except where it related to UFO stuff, but it's like it was more about spirituality. So I started thinking, there might be more to just the general world and the field of spirituality than just belonging to one particular religion. And after a while, I just realized, okay, I don't want to go to church. I'd rather be visiting. And I just felt like I didn't need it anymore. And then I started on this other path and start learning new things. And I was just fascinated by all these other things I was learning. And I just stopped going to church. And my bishop or, minister, whatever you want to call him, he wasn't real happy knowing that I was giving up the church for a person in prison.
Right. Well, but.
Oh, well.
That's where I struggle with churches and, because right there, to me, that's somebody judging you that should not be
right.
judging what you're doing. Okay.
Right.
And I grew up Catholic, and you're supposed to forgive and pay penance and all this stuff. But my question,
I think he would have been fine if I had found the time to do both. But it was
correct.
The fact that I was just stopping going to church so I could visit this person in prison. Well,
the more that you got into the UFOs and aliens and stuff and the fairies and stuff, did you start to think that maybe religion was just something man created?
Yes. And it's interesting because the more I learned about the different alien species, and many of them, were trying to get men to think that they were God. And it's been implied to me that Joseph Smith was really speaking to an alien, and he thought he was talking to God. And it's like, okay, well, that makes sense especially now that I know more. And there's other species, and so I don't know what species he was talking to, but it makes sense to me. Now, the flip side of that, which is kind of funny, is that all the major churches around the world, their leaders know about aliens and work with the military. So it's not that it's a big secret. They just don't talk about it over the pulpit. Correct. One of my good friends is still an active Mormon, but she totally is totally believes and has, experiences with UFOs and stuff. So, and there's a lot of Mormons and former Mormons that I've met that are totally into the UFO thing. But,
yeah. And I think this topic, sure, if I have any listeners out there, they're not going to be happy if they are religious and stuff, and it's not what I'm trying to do. I'm not trying to, you can do whatever you want as far as your religion goes. But part of this show is we want to hear other people's stories. We want to hear their beliefs. We want to hear what's really going on, because we don't know everything. And the more I got into this, it's amazing how much I did not know. It's so funny because we've never talked before today, and when I went and purchased your book, I went and purchased another book about alien species, and you were just talking about all the different alien species. So it fascinated me that I'm like, oh, great, now there's another person confirming what I already thought that I just purchased this book about. So who
wrote that book? Because I think I need to get it.
Yes. I'll tell you right now. Hold on a second. I got to put my eyes on, because I'm up there in age as well. So Craig Campoboso.
I'll have to look for it.
It's called the
Because
Extraterrestrial Species Almanac.
Wow.
And it has...
That's a project we were going to put together because I have tons of pages of different species that Mark has a description about and even stories about. And he's had a lot of experience with this, and he's been to conferences where there have been hundreds of species there, and obviously government meetings, and obviously just military missions. Some of it's been friendly, not always. He's had his share of combat against aliens. So
I would love if you do something like that, if you would contact me and share some of that on my show. Because, I would love to be able to compare what your husband has seen and know to what's in this book and what I've researched myself.
Oh, cool.
So that would be fantastic.
I do a whole talk on just different species. Here's some bunch of friendly ones and here's a bunch of non-friendly ones. And,
So I have a question on that as well. So we talk a lot about the government. So the government releases what they want to release to who they want to release it and redact everything that they can so that the public doesn't see.
Correct.
Are there underground bases?
Yes.
That you know of? Okay.
Yes.
So do you know how long these underground bases have been here?
I do not. The one that I've seen a graphic where somebody had, pinpointed a bunch that were in the United States, and then like the extensive tunnel system, which goes all over underground the United States. The one underground, I know there's an underground base, or there used to be, in Mount Shasta in California.
Okay.
But that was more alien than military. I think there's some in Northern California that are very near where some of the fires have been in the last few years.
That makes sense.
So see the meaning behind what I'm saying.
Right.
And the one I'm most familiar with is a base in Dulce, New Mexico, that a lot of people know about. And Mark was part of a confrontation, 1-hour battle there. And I've been there twice to speak at a conference they used to have there. So.
Wow. Okay. So he was there at that battle. Can you share any information?
Sure.
From that?
And because I know most people think of the Phil Schneider story, which actually I've never really heard Phil talk about it, but about at the same time that Phil Schneider had his encounter, because I think it happened at the same time. Mark won't give me an exact date. And the report I have is based on a report that was written by somebody in the military that went to the Joint Chiefs of Staff. And Mark was one of the people that edited it, so I have a copy. And it was about, how the base got started, various aliens that were there, what it was used for. And it was actually, they started building it in the 40s. And our government allowed it to be there because they figured, by then we were already talking to aliens, and it was a good way to kind of compromise with them. And, they had stuff we wanted. They had stuff we wanted. They wanted to do experiments and stuff. The problem was the experiments got out of hand, especially all the kidnappings and the just the torture they were doing to the human victims. And it was really awful. And then, they were doing genetic testing and mind control stuff and breeding things. And then they were having just sex orgies. And some of our government officials went and joined in that. And it just got way out of hand. And there was a small faction of the military. They had just come back from space, and they'd beat the aliens in a battle in space. And they came back, and they had found out how bad and out of control the things in the Dulce base had gotten to. And so a small faction had decided that they were going to go rescue the women and children. And so, without looking at the report, I don't know who's at the very top in charge, but my father-in-law helped organize that mission. Mark was in charge of one of the 4 or 5 units that entered the facility, and they rescued about 3,500 victims. They were only in there for about an hour, fighting different aliens at different levels. and then they destroyed a significant portion of the base so that they couldn't really use it for what they were using it for several years.
Right.
79, it was fall of 79. So I think most of it left, and they didn't reopen some of it till the early 90s. But
do we know what kind of species these were underground?
well, there were grays there. There were various reptilians. There were at least, there were like 18,000 aliens there at the time. There were a variety of species. There were various reptilians and grays, and I'd have to look at the report, but numerous ones. And again, there were human people working there too, and various government politicians and whatever came and went. And, you could access, the easiest way to access it without anybody knowing you were going there were the underground tunnel system and the train, the tube and the train system that they had. So
right.
Pretty elaborate.
So what kind of weapons did they have?
I don't know.
Okay. Well,
I'm not sure if because
that's a question. That's a question
I
I
don't
get
know
asked.
that the report says, and like Mark has told me, there's the Joint Chiefs of Staff didn't see everything, and there's still stuff that there's way more than I have, the report I have, and it's scary enough. I didn't used to even want to talk about it, and when I first became a speaker, that's what everybody wanted me to talk about because it was the hot news at the time. But
right.
It's like he doesn't like to talk about it. He goes, I was in and out of there in an hour. It was horrific. His job was to rescue as many women and children as they could. And, people tried to test him. It's like, well, what was the floors like? What were the walls like? He goes, I don't know. I wasn't paying attention to, it's like, who cares?
To those details, exactly.
It's like I had a job to do, and that's what I did. So.
Okay. Yeah, because I get asked those kind of questions too as well.
Yeah.
Well,
it may say in the report, but I don't know if he goes into the details. The report probably goes into more details about what they used to blow up this specific part of the base.
Well, I'm assuming that we've had, since they were underground with our permissions, that we've had some of their technology that we were using. So, there's no way, and I've brought this up before in conversations with people, there's no way that our technology advanced as fast as it did going from the 80s till now without some kind of help. There is no way.
No, we've had help.
We went from records to 8 tracks, almost all the way to downloading music on your computer right now, like that. It wasn't that. It wasn't a long period of time.
No, and in fact, it's interesting because there was one mission Mark was on, and what year was it? 76 or 77? I think it was 76, and his dad was involved with an alien battle in the Antarctic, and Mark was in charge with the alien battle over China. And when he wrapped that up, and then he went out, he went through a wormhole that the aliens had come through, and he had to go somewhere. He won't tell me where. I don't know. He went far, far away somewhere, collected an alien weapon, alien technology weapon, and then got to where his dad was in the Antarctic so that they could, kill a certain kind of alien that they were fighting. So, we have been borrowing and using alien technology for quite a while. Right.
And I believe that too. So, you said earlier we're talking about a battle in space. Okay. So,
I know of a few.
Okay. So the technology, were we using their technology for us to get in there, to get into space?
Let's see. After World War II, the RAND Corporation and this developed a rocket for the Air Force. So we were and that was, after World War II, so 40s, 50s. So we were actually going into space, in maybe, I don't know if the late 40s, but definitely in the early 50s.
Right.
In the late 50s, a great uncle or some relative of Mark's and another scientist, Freeman Dyson and Theodore Taylor, developed a space, let me see, a battleship-sized space cruiser. And I think they ended up having to send pieces up and assemble them in space, or I forget all the details. But anyway, it was a space cruiser, and then there were smaller support vehicles, but they were propelled by atomic bombs. And as they were in space, then they would, go forward with atomic bombs. And it wasn't until later over the years that they were upgraded. And it's just some of it was with our human advanced technology that had been developed like in the 30s. One such thing was like some kind of antimatter engine or device or something. It might have been a weapon that was developed originally by one of Mark's grandpas or great grandpas. So, we've developed some cool technology. It's just that, and the military is so far advanced than the civilian space program.
Right.
So, and it's funny because in a fiction book that Mark wrote years ago and I published, he had in his manuscripts, he had pictures of like little spacecraft. And it's like, that looks a lot like what our military, not our military, it's like NASA is like showing that we're going to start using now. So it's pretty funny that he knew about stuff when he was a kid.
Right.
But,
and I worked for Lockheed Martin Aerospace for
did you
17 years. Yeah. So, I was not a rocket scientist by no means, but I worked for him. So I saw a lot of stuff there. So that's what makes me wonder about the technology and how advanced it and fast that we were able to start doing things. So,
right.
So the space battle, do you know how long that lasted?
Let's see. The one, and the thing is, most of these space battles don't last very long. There's one, they don't last very long. There's one that he described, and it might have been the one from, I don't know which one, but one or two that he's described, it maybe lasted 90 seconds and it was over,
wow.
But it was like very dramatic. And, ships in space are imploding or exploding, and, bodies are floating, and, people are dying, and you've realized you've just killed somebody's mother or son or whatever, and, their body's floating off in space. But and you could ram a ship, but the battles don't necessarily take very long, but they're very dramatic.
So were they just the United States involved in this, or was it a world organization? Do you know? There was
a, or I don't know if there still is, but there was an international intelligence agency called International Security. And when it was formed in the 40s after World War II, Admiral Nimitz was put in charge. Mm-hmm. And when he died, my father-in-law was put in charge. So my father-in-law, publicly retired from the Air Force in the mid-60s, and then he was put in charge of this international security. So these space cruisers, we had this fleet, and these space cruisers, there were, I think, 9 of them. The United States built and supplied, maintained 2 of them. The other ones were built or funded and supplied by other countries. France, Germany, England, China, Japan, I don't know if Russia. So, when there's a crisis that affects all of humanity, different countries who we all thought we were at Cold War with each other, and we were, but it's like different countries would pull together and help each other again. They would work together against the greater threat.
Right.
And we used to call, now everybody just calls it the secret space program. In Mark's reports, he calls it the Deep Space Fleet, because that specific fleet, that's what they called it. But different nations worked together. And there was another one, the mission he was on before the Dulce battle happened. It was in August, September of 1979. And I know England was involved because they sent up their cool spacecraft version of a Spitfire, but it was called Spitfire, but it was a spacecraft, and they were part of the mission. And then you had the whole Deep Space Fleet that was involved. So it was different countries, and there were alien allies involved. And, I think the battle itself didn't take very long. It seemed, and I don't know how long it took them to get out to space, more than a couple hours. And so they're meeting a new species on the way, and different things are happening along the way. Again, the battle that's described didn't take very long, but
so
it's yeah.
I'm assuming that all this was off the books. Do you think the presidents at that time knew what was going on? Because I read something the other day that said Dwight Eisenhower, and this was coming from his great-granddaughter,
Laura,
had done a peace treaty
yeah,
with a couple of aliens.
right.
And so I'm wondering, because now we get the presidents go in office and they're like, I'm going to release everything and I can't find nothing. And so it's like, all right, where's it all at? Who knows? And who knew about all this?
Well, here's what happens in kind of a short form. It's like Mark told me early on, basically, when a president gets put into office, then pretty quick after he's inaugurated and stuff, and I don't know how literal this is, but, you go take him in the next room and say, here's the truth about aliens. So at least they know.
Right.
But, they don't have a clearance as high as Mark used to, or some of the military leaders do. So they don't get to know everything.
Right, because they're only there. The longest they could be there is 8 years. So
yeah,
they're not going to be there.
They get to know the reality of it. And when you have these conferences like G20 summits and whatever, there's aliens in the background. They're meeting with aliens. So they do know that there's aliens, and they do meet with them. And some of these conferences I've mentioned that Mark used to be at, he was at one when he was a kid, and then there was another one 10 years later, so he was a young adult. Publicly, you have a huge party that the Shah of Iran is putting on for his country. Secretly, you have a conference between humans and aliens. So, yeah, the world leaders know about this stuff, but there's deals made all the time.
Right, and that's what I believe, too. So the aliens, though, because most people that are probably watching this, or most people that we talk to about, when they think of an alien, they're thinking a gray, this guy right here that looks like this, or they don't realize, they don't realize that there's aliens that almost look identical to how we look. Right.
There's lots of humanoids. There's several types of reptilian species. There's species that look like whales and jellyfish. It just depends on where you're from. There's insects. There's some that are from underwater. If you ever watched the movie Abyss,
yes,
that cool creature that you can see right through, and there are these great lights inside their body. There are creatures like that. So,
Mothman, do you think?
Probably. I don't really know much about Mothman, but so I don't really speak about Mothman. But Bigfoot is an alien. I love Bigfoot.
See, and that's what I thought too, because
Bigfoot is an alien. When
I was a kid, I thought there was only one Bigfoot because all I ever saw was the book with the famous picture of him turned, Yeah. Then as I got older and
there's
was able
more.
to research more. Oh, there's so much more. Living in Florida, there's a skunk ape. Is what it's called.
Oh, yeah.
Because of the smell.
Okay.
And then as I started reading this alien book here, it was amazing how many different species there were.
Yeah. So, well, at the conference Mark was at as a kid, so it was 1961 in southern England, there were at least 100 species. And he got to play with the children of several of the species. When he was at the conference in 1971, and he was part of the security team, there were at least twice as many. Because they'd heard about the one in 1961 and they all wanted to come. So, a lot of species sent their delegates. You still had enemies and you still had sabotage attempts against the conference, but, we need to do whole talks about that.
Yeah. Well, and that's, like you said before, some are good, some are bad.
Right.
Which brings me to my religious part, good and evil. Right. Looking at it, you think, what could transpose, by all of us knowing all this?
Well, it's interesting because I think the religions, and, I have to say now that I'm not religious, a lot of religion people talk about it, it's there to control you. It's a lot of rules. And, I messed up my life for a certain period of time, just trying to follow all the rules and then messing it up. But they think the people will shatter, and, their belief system is going to go, they're just going to go over the edge. But again, the Catholics have several observatories, and, Mark used to meet with various Catholic leaders because they collect UFO debris and whatever, and they collect evidence, and a lot of it's kept in the Vatican archives. So, he was constantly meeting with Catholic leaders to, deal with this kind of stuff.
Right.
Now, what I want to say, though, is he learned as a kid that some of the scariest looking aliens are very friendly. And I've learned through talking with him and reading reports and just my own research is some of them are very spiritual. They don't believe in the Christian God, but several of them are very Zen-like. And when I'm speaking, I have a quote that was given in 1971 at the conference I mentioned. And the raptor, which is a kind of reptilian, there was a raptor senator who was 300 years old at the time of that conference.
Right.
And he's still alive. He gave the most, I don't have the quotes from his whole talk, but I have several paragraphs, and it just talks about, it just moves me to tears almost every time. And it talks about how everything is infinite and wonderful, and we're all connected, and it's just really gives you insight into their level of spirituality. And this is a creature who is a beautiful dinosaur to this day. They still look like dinosaurs. They're proud of it, and they're very spiritual.
So, and that's what I've been reading and watching too. You've heard of CE5, correct?
I have.
Encounters of the Fifth Kind. So right. a lot of that is meditation.
Okay.
Is to try and have contact with an alien or an alien species by meditating and almost telepathically going to them.
Right.
And then they come and you can physically see this. So I've seen a lot of shows that have this on there. There's an app you can download now and find other like-minded people that do that. So right. What my question for all that is, does that move over into the paranormal world? So do you think that ghosts and spirits are part of this alien contact that we're doing? Are they here? Because I'm wondering. There was one guy I saw. A whole bunch of them were in a group, and they were all doing this meditation and stuff, and they had cameras around them filming them. And then there was this orb spirit behind this gentleman. Now, this gentleman was deaf, could not hear at all. And so he spoke to them and he said, "Hey, I know you have great technology, and, can you just fix my hearing for me?" They didn't say anything to him. They didn't do anything. They just kind of hung around him. He went to bed the next morning, got up, and could hear.
Oh, wow.
So you couldn't see them. All you could see next to him was a light spirited orb. So I started thinking, could this be what we've been seeing for years, or what we're thinking are ghosts? Could that be just aliens hanging out?
Anything's possible. In my experience, the orbs are of the fairy realm.
Okay.
And I know there's other psychic people who their experience includes, the orbs being spirits of deceased people, which is fine with me. But I feel and see spirits in a different manner. They don't show up to me as an orb. I'm usually feeling them, or I can see their shadow. I have a friend who's a trance medium. She can actually see what they looked like when they were alive. So that's pretty cool. Yeah. Because I'm feeling them, she's feeling them and seeing them, and she can talk to them. I also work with a channeling medium in California, and now I'm only doing it on an individual basis, but I've been in group sessions where different alien entities have come through, and they're not necessarily dead aliens, but they still come through. And I'm usually sitting by the medium, and I can feel that energy. And some of them know who my husband is, so that's pretty weird.
Right.
That's pretty cool. I go, well. From one of them, I go, okay, well, I know you under this name, and they go, yeah, that's right. And so I go, it's like they admitted that they know my husband, but a couple of different aliens have come through, and we've learned a lot about, so now I can bring that element into my talks. It's like, okay, here's some more about this species that I didn't know as much about, just from what my husband wrote, and now I have a lot more. So that's really cool, because it's, right out of the alien's mouth. One of my spirit guides, who I haven't talked to much because I need to meditate more and communicate with her personally, she is a living raptor. And I know she's alive, but she's also come through that channeling medium just to introduce herself to me as one of my guides, or one of my spirit team to watch over me.
Right.
So that's pretty cool. So I need to make the effort to really talk to her, because I'm probably not going to get to go to where she lives and just hang out and have tea anytime soon, even though that's part of my bucket list.
Okay. Well, hey, gotta have
and
that
she
bucket
knits.
list. And she
knits. It's like, okay, how cool would that be to sit around with several older raptor females who knit and like tea?
Exactly. That'd be awesome. So let me ask you a question. When you met your husband, did he come right out and start telling you all this?
No.
Okay. I didn't think so.
It took months, and it was probably a few years, actually. He was writing a family history, which has turned into thousands of pages. I don't know how we'll ever get it published. But it also involves world history, and how his family was involved with things that were going on around the world. So I was helping with that. And I had a little publishing company to help get some things out, and I started this business. And then he sent me a bunch of reports that he'd already written, and then eventually, I'm reading one of them because I'm typing it up so I can sell it. And it's like, this is about a space mission and about your alien girlfriend and this space battle you had, and it's like, oh my gosh. And so part of the ways he tells me things is by giving me another report. And so I learn his involvement. But by the time I went to my first UFO conference, because he suggested that I go, I knew enough. I didn't know as much as I knew the following year, but I knew enough so that I could meet different speakers and say, okay, this is what my husband was involved in. And then by the next year, I had enough information and enough reports that I could have a booth at that conference. And then a couple years later, I was doing interviews. And then in 2007, I went to England for the first time to speak. So
nice. No,
he did not tell me right away.
Did you think, oh my God, this guy's nuts at first?
No, I didn't. It's funny because I grew up watching, Martian movies, which was fine.
Yep.
That was fun in the 50s. And you and I probably might have seen some of the same ones.
Oh, yeah, probably.
And by the time he told me any of this, it like I said, it had been a few years maybe, or, it was more than a year at least, but long enough so that I was already involved with him and I trusted him. And a lot of the stuff he had told me before that was just really cool information. And I'd been to his family's house and seen evidence that the family had, lived in several places around the world. And so I was like, well, if this is true, it just didn't bother me. It's like, oh, okay, that's what you did. Great.
Well, and for as much information that he gave you to, you have to look at that and go, there's no way he's sitting here, he made all this up. There's no way.
I don't think so.
Too
it's
much
just
detail.
Too much
detail.
Yeah.
And that's what I was wondering too. So do your friends and stuff that you knew before all this, what do they think about all this right now with you? Are you still in contact with any of your old friends, or do they look at you and go, okay, you've lost it, lady?
They never, it's not like they disowned me or anything. I probably lost touch with them because, their life went this way and my life went that way. And they were a little shocked that I was dating somebody in prison because, again, I didn't tell my friends at first that he was in prison. I just said I met this really cool guy. My family wasn't thrilled either, but
you have to live your life.
I don't have a wide circle of friends anyway, but and now more of my friends are the people in the UFO or fairy or paranormal world. And again, my life used to be, I'd go visit Mark every week. So I'm working pretty much 6 days a week, most of Sunday or whatever, most of, 1 day a weekend was visiting him. And when I met him, visiting was 4 days a week. And so I had my office right by the prison he was at the time. It's like, I'd go to work, I'd go visit, I'd go back to work. And so it's like my life, and that was it. And, now I have grandkids and they're teenagers, so I don't see them as much, but, so it was pretty much family and Mark, and then going to different conferences a few times a year.
Well, and there's nothing wrong with that at all. Nothing wrong with that. So, another question on the, species before we move, because I want to hear about the fairies,
cool.
Your stuff on that. So, but where are all these species at? Where are they staying? I mean, are they in the house right next door? Or are they okay?
Most of them are off planet.
Okay.
I know, and there are several species, 4 or 5 that live in the oceans, and some of them are native to this planet, and some came from. And if I might get this wrong, there might have been 3 or 4 that were native to this, originated here, and maybe several that came off planet and now live under the oceans. And so it's pretty normal that you would see spacecraft coming out of the oceans. The dinosaur species and their offshoot or their distant cousin that now works with terrorists, they originated on this planet. They descended from the dinosaurs. So they've been around a long time. They also have, especially the raptors that we talk about a lot, they have a huge empire out in space and different, moons, and they've terraformed places so they can live. So they have a very vast empire out in space, as do many species. But most of the species live off planet. That doesn't mean, several species have visited here, many times, coming and going. I think it more depends on, can you handle being on the Earth? Do you have to wear a biosuit to even walk around on the surface? That kind of thing. But we've had visitors for thousands of years, I would imagine. And if you go, there's lots of evidence of alien visitors, like in cave art and whatever. And then if you go to Göbekli Tepe Temple in Turkey, there's round pads that were landing pads for various creatures, spacecraft, and there's different, like animal-like carvings of different creatures on, the walls and things like that, because there were, cat species and dog species and all different species that used that spaceport. So there's evidence everywhere, or lots of places, that species have been visiting here. So.
The hieroglyphics in Egypt.
Yeah.
I mean, there's some that are amazing. If you look at them and you go, that's a spaceship.
Yeah.
The cat-like figures that they used.
Right.
Stone.
And I know there's a dog species that has a base in Australia. I don't know exactly where, but they were allowed to have that. There's a species that is our enemy at this moment that has a huge base in North Africa. There's many bases in Africa, South and North Africa, or Southern and Northern. There's a few species that have bases in North America, different places.
Stonehenge, is that a portal?
Yes.
See, and I've always thought that too. I mean, I know my mind's like, so. Okay,
yes.
So let's.
Fairies?
Well, yeah, let's get to fairies.
Okay.
I'm curious to find out what you know about them. How did you first find out about fairies? And
Mark.
Because people are going to think Tinkerbell.
No, fairies. And fairies is just one type of an elemental. They're called elementals. They're energy beings. The umbrella term would be the fairy realm, but there's different kinds. You have fairies and brownies and sprites and gnomes and different kinds. They come in different sizes. They look different. Some of them can change their appearance either to mess with you or because they think this is what you want to see. They're not always cute little Tinkerbell looking humans with wings. Now, one time I surprised one while I was watering the flowers, and one did fly off, and I thought, was that a butterfly? Oh no, that's not a butterfly. That looks pretty human with wings.
Wow.
And I don't see that very often. Usually, if I'm taking a picture, I can capture the orbs. A lot of times I just feel the energy. In our California house, if I've done something to piss them off, somebody will push me up or down the stairs, or they'll hide something of mine that I need. And then after I ask really nicely, then they might pull it out from that pile of paper. But they're energy beings. They love this planet. Now, different species have their own. And so there are fairies out in space, but the ones that are here, this is their Mother Earth, and they're horrified at what we've done to it. They're horrified by the fires because they're ruining their portals. They're just horrified that we're not good stewards of this planet. And I've only seen like their faces, or, like one or two times I've surprised them when I'm watering, but especially at our house in California, it's like, we have beds and houses for them all over the place, and I will leave out treats for them on various holidays, and especially the moon phases. And now that I'm, in Oregon, I do the same thing. I don't have houses for them everywhere, but I have a whole shelf that's dedicated to fairy stuff, and I have a little place where I leave treats and things like that. So,
what kind of treats do you leave?
They love chocolate. They love sweets.
Okay. Sometimes
I'll put out wine. Sometimes. If depends on the holiday, it's just bread and water type of thing. But, breads, nuts, because when they're done eating, and if there's leftovers, like especially in my California house, the squirrels and the deer would come, and the raccoons would come eat whatever was left. So there was never anything left. So
were they here?
They love sweets.
Were they here already? Where did they come from? Do you know?
I don't know where they came originally, but they've been here for thousands of years. So there's one that lives with Mark, and he's been Mark's companion since Mark was a kid. And together, Cloudy will bring up, okay, on this day in history, I remember this. And it's like hundreds of years ago.
Right.
Because he was there. He can remember Queen Victoria's days and other things about these famous things that happen. And it's like, it's amazing.
And they choose one person to hang around? Like you said, that one's been with Mark.
I think it depends. Mark has this particular one, but Mark's had other ones, and Mark can communicate with them. Now, for Mark, Cloudy, will corporealize, and Mark can see him, but he's also shown himself to other people in, sometimes he turns up as a blue squirrel, and, he can take different shapes.
Right.
So he's a cute guy.
Do you have some? You said you have some in Oregon, correct?
I'm hoping so. I'm acting as if I do, because I talk to them and I leave treats for them. And
so these are not the same ones that were in California. The ones that were in California stayed there?
Because the ones, that some of them seem to have left because they were sorry that I left the house for a little while. But, when I'm there checking on the house, it's still magical because the deer will come and I'll talk to the deer, and we have a very strong connection. It doesn't matter which generation it is. The deer love me when I'm there. So I'm always putting out treats, and, even if it's just for the deer,
right.
Because they're part of the magical realm that, I'm connected to.
So what started you? Did they just appear? Or did you find out and start researching them?
Well, Mark had told me about it, but before I moved into the California house, I was there spending the night with a psychic friend. And we were drinking a little, not much, but we were, trying to stay awake, and we're talking, and different spirits were showing up. I think Mark's grandma showed up, and again, she could see them, but I could feel them. But all of a sudden, I looked at this bush, which by day, it's just a palm bush. It's a palm plant. But all of a sudden, it looked like a very full, like you would see a hedge made out of.
Right.
It didn't look like a palm plant to me. And there was a like human-sized head looking at me, this beautiful woman. And I go, oh, that's got to be the fairy queen. And I don't know if she's the fairy queen or if she's just the head garden fairy that lives at the house. But, it was just beautiful and it was just real. And probably some of my other experiences happened after that, but that was my introduction. And Mark had talked about it, but that was my introduction to having my own experiences. I'd had paranormal experiences before I met Mark.
Oh, did
and
okay.
I talk about that in the book, but then I got reconnected into that after I started meeting different psychics and things like that, and then that all got connected between paranormal and alien stuff anyway. But yeah.
So, did you ever think when you were at the church still that you would ever be talking to somebody like me about UFOs and sprites
Never.
and paranormal and fairies?
No, and it's interesting because there's a person out there, I don't say his name, who's trying to discredit us a lot. But he actually tracked down one of my ex-husbands, who's now a Mormon bishop, which I find laughable.
Right.
But, and, he was telling the guy about, well, I'm married to this murderer and, I'm doing UFO stuff. I think he said the UFO stuff. I don't know. I wasn't there. And the guy goes, oh, that's not the discerning Joe I knew. And I was like, well, yeah, if I'd been as discerning back then, I wouldn't have married you. But, it's like my discernment and my intuition has just blossomed. Not that I didn't have any intuition, as a Mormon, but it's really blossomed these last 20 years.
Right.
And I can look at my husband and tell him something I know, and he's not always happy, but he can't necessarily deny it.
Right. But
maybe my timing is off, but it's like, I know this is going to happen, or I know this.
Well, people are always going to try and discredit. Okay?
Yeah.
I mean, that's because people don't, they don't want to accept what they don't understand or they can't physically see.
Right.
And I'm one of those people that, I believe, I want to see proof, but I still believe because
that's good.
I believe in people, first of all, and you can't always believe what you see.
Right.
And especially in today's day and age where it's so easy to manipulate everything.
Right.
You have to trust that people are consistently talking about what they're talking about and trust them, because what benefit does it have?
Thank you for saying that, because some of these people who keep wanting us to show proof that Mark was in the military or show proof that it's like, like you just said, in today's day and age, I could show you a picture or I could show you that document, but you can Photoshop this or that, or,
Correct.
you could change it and all of a sudden I'm lying like you think I am. And again, I'm a bookkeeper. I make a lot more money at bookkeeping than I do selling my UFO reports.
Yeah. And that's another thing I want to talk about is your site for that too. Yeah. Because your book was not expensive. The book on Amazon, it wasn't
totally
expensive either.
That's a totally separate thing than my UFO stuff. So,
right.
I have a nonprofit called Earth Defense Headquarters, and I started that years ago. So that's where all the UFO-based reports and things, it's edhca.org or edhq.org.
And we'll put that link on at the end of the show too,
Great.
so people can go there if they want. My
book, I needed that to be separate because I don't want that to be part of the nonprofit. My book is, I have a publishing company called DragonHillBooks.com or .net, and it includes a couple fiction books that Mark wrote that I published several years back when we first met. So you can get the book on Amazon. You can also order it from my website. Either way, but it's not a long read, and it is weird. People, it's like it's the whole overview. It's like, okay, here's this normal suburban childhood, as normal as that gets.
Right.
Then you're a Mormon and you think you need to have this perfect marriage. So I kept trying to get there.
And that's what was interesting to me about the book was, it's like you said on the book, it's a journey of you.
Yeah.
And to watch, when I started reading it, I'm like, okay, what's this guy do with UFOs and stuff? Because that was my interest in having you on this show.
Right.
But the more I started reading the book, I was like, ooh, now I'm really fascinated. Okay. Because now we're going through all the marriages. We're going through Mormon. We're going through your husband in prison. And I'm like, okay, where is this going? So, I mean, it really, and to me, that's what made this book really interesting. And then we could start getting into the UFOs and the fairies and your spirit life. And I'm like, okay, so yeah, for me, this was great. And I do want people to make sure they go out and check out this book.
And two, really it's like, that's kind of the jumping off point for me, because I know it's like my journey isn't over just because, okay, I found magic. Great. I'm done. Great. I found a good husband. I'm done. I've made it. I'm successful.
Right.
I have other things I want to do with my life, and I want to share so much with people. And I want to share about the good aliens and the bad, okay, but I want to share. It's like, I would love to sit down and have tea with them.
Right.
Hopefully, I want disclosure in a good way right now. Some of them want that to happen. COVID has slowed that down.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. So do you have any conferences coming up soon that you want to promote or anything? If it still happens, yes. If it still happens, there's the Mystical Minds Conference in Dublin, California. It's in the San Francisco Bay Area. The weekend of it's October 1st and 2nd. I'm speaking there. Then they're going to have a second session of it in February in San Jose. So I haven't heard from her lately. It's like, okay, there's a new variant coming out, not coming out. There's a new variant. COVID cases are rising again. I don't know if I'm going to feel comfortable speaking there in person. And I don't know, she had to cancel it for 2020 because of COVID had just started, and she was going to have one in California, and then everything got shut down. She hasn't reached out and said, hey, we can't have it. So I don't know. That's what I'm supposed to be doing. Okay. Well, make sure you give me that information.
And now I'm trying to get on podcasts, and, the more speaking I get, obviously I'm not afraid to speak.
No, yeah, that's great, though. That's fantastic. Let me ask you a question about, though, while we're talking about COVID.
Sure.
So what do you think these alien species, are they worried about something like COVID? Do they?
Okay.
I know I'm going there, and you're like, okay.
I'm glad you're going there, because now I can say it's like there is a negative alien species who helped introduce it.
Okay.
And they're not our friends. And they keep helping to create new variants.
Which makes a lot of sense.
If they can't kill enough of us off, they want to kill a lot of us off, and they want to ruin our economy. Do
we know what species this is? Do you know?
They're called the reptoids.
Reptoids, okay.
And they also evolved from the dinosaurs, but they walk upright now, and they look very human-like. They work with ISIS. When ISIS was a big topic, they were backing ISIS. They've backed a lot of terrorist plots. So they're not our friends. They would like to take over. They would like to. There's a lot of species who would like to, live here on a more permanent basis, I think, and have not very many of us around. And yes, there are other species who it affects and would be very harmful to them. So maybe they can't be on the planet right now like they normally are.
Right. So
and they've had to evacuate.
So with everything that we've been talking about, is there? Because Hollywood does a lot of these shows, these movies that. When you start doing research into stuff like this, you're going, how much of this did they get? Because Men in Black, to me, would be the perfect scenario.
I love that movie.
I know, which would describe everything we've been talking about. How true is this? Because in this book right here, there's a chapter in here on Men in Black, which are.
I used to tease Mark, that United Nations type place that I think was underground in the movie, and you have all these species walking around.
Yes.
And I used to tease him. I go, are there really places like that? He goes, yeah. And he could name a few. And in this I guess it's the Star Wars movie, whatever movie that they go out in space and there's the bar, blah, 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 blah. I go, are there like bars like that? Yeah.
Wow.
The military is known for feeding information to TV and Hollywood. And Mark and his dad, they were all part of that. It's like Star Trek got a lot of information from the military. Howard Hughes, a lot of these, and Jurassic World, which is my favorite.
Yep.
Those raptors in that Jurassic World look very much like the raptors that work with my husband.
But see, there's a big difference because the government wants to portray that every alien is bad. They're
see,
horrible.
here's the thing. The raptors want disclosure, and the raptors are our allies. They've been our allies since the early 50s, and they help fund these movies that make them not look so bad.
See, and that's, I know it just kills me. I'm like,
they help fund a lot of cute animated movies and cartoon series.
E.T.
And if you go back and look,
Third Kind.
Pardon me?
E.T. Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Those are
and
movies that did not portray aliens
Yeah.
in a bad light.
Yeah. But Jurassic World, when I watched that movie, I was looking through the credits. I'm going, look at those names. Now, I know it was made maybe by a Malaysian country or companies or whatever. It's like, there's a lot of names in there of crew or, people who helped produce the movie. It's like, and I go, they sound like made-up names, like your raptor friends would have made up names for themselves so they could get in the credits because they helped make that movie.
That's unbelievable. That is unbelievable.
Yeah, and the scenes where the cute hero is riding his three-wheeler through the jungle with the raptors. Mark used to train like that, only on a motorcycle with his raptor friends.
Really?
And I have his jacket that's like the bomber jacket that the guy wears in the movie. It's like, you took a page out of Mark's training. So
that's crazy.
So the raptors are really not notorious. They really like to be involved with helping further the media and get the word out there that they're not all bad, and
that's great. Well, I would love to have you back on here again
anytime.
And definitely, I would love to find out some more about the alien species that you have.
Cool.
That you got from Mark, to kind of compare with this book and see, because everything you're saying, most of the ones you've been talking about are in this book as well. So that means there's more than just one or two people know about this.
Right.
And they know about these species. I didn't know about all these species till I started researching all this. So it's not like it's something that's just right out there.
No, and in some of the reports Mark's written, he's been, in the early 70s, the military knew about this and this and this. And it's like, the military knows where the aliens live out there. The aliens don't want us to know because we're going to go wreak havoc.
Right, exactly.
We shoot first and ask questions later. We put trash out in space. They don't want us out there.
Yep.
So,
So on your non-for-profit site, what can we find on that site? On
the one that ends with the EDHQ, there's a video of one of my talks that I've done about the secret space program through the years. The other one, EDHCA.org, definitely has the list of reports that I sell.
Okay.
So lots of, there's a ton of reports.
All those reports are the reports and stuff that you got from Mark?
Yeah, pretty much, except there's maybe one that somebody else wrote for me.
Okay, great.
But most of them are stuff that he's written and researched and been a part of. If he wasn't a part of it, his dad was, or it's just information he's done research on. Some of it's just science facts.
Okay.
But, yeah.
All right, sounds great. Well, again, I appreciate you being on this show.
Thanks for having me.
Everybody, make sure you go to Amazon or go to Joanne's site and get this book, Midlife Magic.
Yeah, dragonhillbooks.net.
There you go. And again, I'll put the links and everything for anything you need to get a hold of her for her website or anything. We'll have it all on there. So
thanks so much.
All right. Thank you for joining the Ed Sullivan Show, everybody. We will be back again sometime next week. Probably Tuesday we'll air this. And we'll see you then. You guys have a great night.
Bye.
Bye-bye.